Welcome back to another Conversations with Cohen. I can't believe it's been 4 years, Larry, but Larry Hutcher was a guest of mine in July of 2020. So 4 years later, we're back and a lot has changed in the world, obviously, and a lot has changed in the legal industry. So we'd love to hear from you today about your take on what's occurring in the legal industry as a law firm leader. But maybe we can start like we always do. Larry, if you'd be so kind enough to introduce yourself to everyone.
Sure. Good afternoon, Gregg. Good to see you again. It's amazing how quickly time passes. It was like yesterday. I am Larry Hutcher. I am the co-managing partner of Davidoff, Hutcher and Citrin. We are a law firm with our principal office in Manhattan with satellite offices in Albany, Washington, Long Island, Florida, and happy to speak to you.
Thanks so much, Larry. So let's start off with what I feel like is going on in every law firm, trying to figure out artificial intelligence and the role that artificial intelligence is going to play in the industry going forward. So perhaps you can first start by sharing with us your initial take, and then maybe we can go into how you're trying to incorporate it into your practice.
It obviously is the big buzzword. I know that I have clients seeking to develop software applications and trying to harness the great potential that this has. At this stage, I, and like many other attorneys I speak to, are very, very wary of AI. I think at this stage, it has led to more embarrassments than actual productivity. We're all familiar with the cases of the attorneys who simply put an AI search and wind up not doing their backup, and cases have been cited that do not exist, or arguments that have been asserted that clearly have no legal basis because some AI program generated them. Too many attorneys see this as a solution rather than a tool. And we are very, very mindful of the significant benefits that can be derived from using it, but it is this stage nothing more than an initial tool, kind of like where online research was 30, 40 years ago, where, you would do your initial research online, but you would double check it with every book or citation to every cases. So the ability to generate forms, in other words, hey, Google, or hey, chatbox, give me a contract that would relate to the sale of real estate. It's a starting point. It nor can it ever be used as a finished product, that I believe. So it is simply just another weapon that we can put in our arsenal to help us achieve. It will expedite delivery of a work product, but at this stage, it is not, nor can it be a one-off solution to anything.
Are there tools that you have already adopted in your organization that are based on artificial intelligence, even for
Not
operations?
specifically. I know that there are people in the firm, particularly those who do research, that are exploring the use of these. Being in a more senior position, I'm reliant on the people who work with me to give me the initial drafts of contracts or briefs. So I know that they are using those types of programs and facilities, but I do not have that personal knowledge. But, my attitude is, guys, use whatever resources are out there. Feel free to explore them. Go out there, talk to people, speak to vendors, find out what's available, but just be careful as to how you employ it.
So when you think about, the first thing I hear a lot about is, well, it's going to have an impact on staffing, which goes to the hiring, right? Because right now, when we think about what's happening in the legal industry, there's a ton of lateral moves, right? And there's this incredible war for talent. So would love to hear from you how your firm thinks about retention and recruitment of talent.
We have been a firm that has been in existence now for 50 years, and we pride ourselves on our culture. We're never going to be able to compete with, the Scaddens or the Wild Gottschalks, and we don't try to. What we have identified is a market that works for us, which is a middle market, which is anywhere from companies doing 10 million to 200 million. We don't look for the the stock exchange companies. We look for the privately held businesses. We call ourselves the quintessential New York firm. Anybody that has any business in New York, we are the firm that is best ideally suited to represent that. We have government relations practice that specializes in any issue that affects New York City. We are more often than not the Supreme Court commercial division practice based. I would say 60% of our practice is in the commercial division. Every judge knows me, knows our attorneys. So that type of expertise, coupled with our desire to create a culture that we are known as the aggressive. I guess in today's world, we would try to compare ourselves to the scrappy Knicks. We may not have the bench of 200 lawyers like other firms, but you're going to get hard-driven, hard-nosed, aggressive firm. And that's the type of attorney we solicit to hire. And the clients recognize that. And that's why they come to us. So I'm sure there are firms that pay significantly more. And I'm sure there are firms that everybody there has a background at Harvard or Columbia. We want the scrappies. We want the people that are going to work twice as hard and ultimately get the rebound over the 7-footer. That's the analogy that we make. So I'm sorry with the basketball analogies, but I've been to Madison Square Garden a lot recently, watching the Knicks.
So I hear. And how many years have you been going? How many years have you been?
48 years season subscriber.
Wow. Well, it's a good year to be a Knicks fan.
Yeah, finally. 2 out of 20 out of the last 20. 25 probably.
We'll just relish in today. So you talk about culture. And I guess my question would be, how do you define the culture of your organization?
We are not a remote-based firm. I know attorneys and law firms that have attorneys spread out all over, and they think that works for them. That's not the way I believe. I believe in a collegial environment. I believe that we get together and we go over cases, we go over issues, and the client benefits from that. And I believe that can only be accomplished on a face-to-face basis. It's not a Zoom world, even though we're doing this by Zoom. It's done on, I have an issue. I call 3 attorneys in and we go over it. And I believe that results in a learning process that inures to everyone's benefit. The attorneys, whether he or she had an issue, she understands that you're part of a team. The key to that is making sure at the beginning when somebody is hired, what their expectations are. I have people come in and say, I'd like to work remotely. I go, you're great. I love your resume. I love you, but that's not going to work for us. And this is what I expect from you. I expect you to work in a collegial environment where everybody gets along, everybody shows up to work every day, and we're all on the same team. That's not going to happen remotely, as I may be a dinosaur in today's world, but I would say I'm a successful dinosaur.
How does your client benefit from this?
The client benefits from it because they're getting the benefit of knowledge from a group of people that derives from a cohesive work atmosphere that's there to support each other. And this isn't putting 3 people on a bill. This is about simply getting the benefits of a lot of particular knowledge when it's readily available. We sit around, we have lunch in a conference room every day. We talk, basketball, but we talk cases a lot of the time. And there is an exchange of ideas. And those exchange of ideas leads to great work and benefits for the client. That I'm a true believer in that.
And when you talk about it from the benefit of your staff, I would imagine there was some initial pushback, but what has the feedback been as a result of that?
I don't have any pushback because the key that I had to make clear and make sure everyone understood is this is what's expected of you. If you expected this to be a remote work environment, then it's not the right place for you. And you come in with the expectation and not the expectation, the desire. I want people who want to be in the office. I'm not looking for people that say, oh, it's a 2-hour commute back and forth. It's a waste of my time. Then you're just not the right person for me. And I'm spoiled. I live in New York City, so my commute on a city bike is 15 minutes. I understand the difficulty of getting on a train and going to a train station, but that's the job you signed up for. And if you want to be part of a team, then this is the right job for you.
I was going to say with regards to administrative staff, I imagine there might be challenges for them. So are there things that you do in your office that outside of the collegial atmosphere that you've created are incentives to be able to encourage
Sure.
that?
So the big thing that we have done is assistants and back office, they don't need to, they only have to work every other Friday. So they're permitted to work remotely one day of the week. And that is a benefit that I think they enjoy. If their attorney needs them in, they have to come in. But otherwise, we try to be very accommodating. Where I also realize every rule has exceptions. I'm a big believer in well-rounded attorneys and professionals. Your kid's soccer game is important. If you want to go to the game, I totally understand. Leave at 3. Catch up with your work later. Your kid is in a school recital. Get your butt home and go see that. I'm not a taskmaster, nor is anyone here that says it's 24/7 in the office. I've never wanted that. I don't expect my people to work weekends. So it's all part of the equation of making clear exactly what it is I expect of you. I expect you to be here during the week, but I don't need you in the weekends. I don't want you to work weekends. I want you to have a well-rounded life. But when you're working, I want it in the office.
Let's change topics here. As we look to last year and the beginning of this year, there seems to be a lot of an increased amount of M&A in the industry. How do you think, not specifically about your own practice, but how do you think about, and how should folks think, how should other managing partners think about to merge or not to merge, weighing the economies of scale, why to merge with somebody? Can you offer some insights there?
Sure. And I think I'm particularly well suited to address this. My practice involves many times, a good significant portion of my practice involves the breakup of law firms or the leaving of professional services, whether it's a doctor or a real estate agent. So I see these issues all of the time. And I can tell you there is no easy or simple answer to that question. Every case has its own particular reasons. Many times, the typical reason I think most firms break up is the expiration of a lease. You have the termination of a lease date, and the senior partners are looking, either have no desire to relocate, or they're saying, I'm not going to guarantee a lease if that would be a requirement. So more often than not, the terminus of a lease is many times the driving force. One of the other major driving forces is age. I'm at this stage right now where I'm in my 70s. A lot of other law firms like us have been in existence for 40, 50 years. Senior partners are getting old. How do you assure the transition to the next generation? How do you ensure that there's going to be a place for the clients to continue to come once that senior management is left? That is very much a driving force. How do you ensure that there will be money to pay out partners that are leaving? So I've been involved in mergers and acquisitions where senior management says, we want to make sure that our retirement is funded. So what we are going to do is merge with another firm that will at least say, they have the financial resources to fund ongoing stuff. And typically the old firm will keep its receivables to pay off the obligations of the capital accounts of the retiring partners. Or, you find many times that small firms have developed a client that is getting bigger than they are. And the small firm doesn't want to lose that client. So they'll say, look, we need to grow with this client. We can't do it quickly enough. So let's find a firm that has the wherewithal, resources, and locations that we can follow this client through its growth, which is always a wonderful thing. All I can tell you is, having been involved in this maybe 100 times, there are 100 different reasons why certain firms merge. You have a lot of times a key partner will be solicited by another firm. They'll unlike a lot of other industries, lawyers even now were never subject to a non-compete. A lawyer can leave tomorrow and not be subject to any non-compete. There are always recruiters calling and saying, are you interested in moving? A lot of times that is a major rainmaker at a firm. So a smaller firm loses one or two rainmakers. They have a choice, either disband or or get merged. So that's a very common occurrence.
There's a couple of questions from there, which is, how do you prevent rainmakers from walking out the door?
Overpay them.
Okay.
That's the only answer. Make them feel that you hug them, kiss them, make them feel good. They're your favorite child. Even though you have 4 favorite childs, each one of them has to feel that they're the favorite child.
You talked about thinking about how to ensure continuity in a firm. That sounds like a big task to overcome or to tackle, pardon me. How do you think about that?
What you realize with respect to talent, you can always hire good lawyers. It's very hard to hire or find rainmakers. And they know that. Anybody who's a rainmaker typically has a pretty big ego and recognizes their value. And they want to be treated like the superstar on the team. It's very rare that you have a rainmaker who is truly selfless and is willing to sacrifice for the good of the company as opposed to having their own self-interest. I mean, a lot of times they're not mutually incompatible, so you can find both, but it's unusual. And typically management has to ensure that those serious rainmakers are given the resources that they need. There's got to be a commitment to that person to say your growth, continued growth as a rainmaker, as a producer, as a doer of the business is going to be best served by you staying here. And whether you do that through a combination of talent, money, in other words, talent, making sure that anybody with a big book is going to need good people around them. You know, you start getting to a point where you got 10, 15, $20 million worth of business, you're going to have to hire a lot of people to service that. So one of the things we always say is, I'm going to make sure that you have the talent to do it and do it well. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, you know, you have the ability to earn, and I'm going to make sure that you are financially rewarded. Third, you know, you weren't previously on management. You want to be involved in management? I'll give you a say going forward. The key is to invest those parties in the continued growth and success of the company. Without that, they're nothing more than a glorified free agent who will leave at the quickest opportunity to get a better offer.
Understood. And you had mentioned the addition of people, so that made me think about bolt-on acquisitions and thinking about the dollar signs that come with a team or a rainmaker and the cultural shift that may occur as a result of that. So can you shed a little light as to how you've thought about that in the past?
Well, yeah, here is the big issue, and I've been very familiar with this too. There's a big difference between bringing in one attorney, 2 attorneys, and bringing in groups of attorneys. It's far easier to assimilate 1 or 2 attorneys into a practice. And that requires a significant effort. You need to ensure that the clientele is merged, that they don't become an island unto themselves. And you need to be very, very mindful of the integration process. With respect to taking in a firm, I have been aware of so many occasions where there has been mergers and all they are separate firms under one roof. There's never been a full integration of the practices or the groups. Yeah, an attorney will say, oh, look, we got an office in Nashville now. If I need, I can call somebody up. But unless there is a concerted effort by the firm to literally join those 2 firms into one, it's doomed to failure, or at worst, just creating separate fiefdoms that are never integrated into a more powerful unit. So it takes a lot of work to make that happen. That's why I've always preferred the idea for our firm. We've been very successful in bringing in one-offs all the time, as opposed to firms.
For those who are listening, I understand that a lot of work and business that law firms do is a result of networking and referrals from other law firms. So
correct.
I'd love for you to share some of either the successes you've had or some things that for folks who are listening, it might resonate with them so that they can know more about you and your firm.
Probably the 2 single most successful relationships I have in terms of generating business come from other attorneys, from 2 other attorneys in particular. One is a good friend who is in the real estate business, high-end residential closings. That's all they do. They'll do the 30, 40, $50 million closings, but that's all they do. And then when you're dealing with people that are buying those kinds of apartments, they always have other problems. And thankfully, they go to this other firm and say, can you recommend somebody? And I become the resource, whether it's a commercial litigation, whether it's a divorce, whether it's a estate planning. I say to them, I am your resource, and I will never interfere with your relationship with a client. If it's any additional work, I always clear it with the attorney. I never try to take any client ever away from another firm. Similarly, somebody found me online with respect to a case I handled that had a similar matter. And they called me up, and that relationship has now developed into an incredibly successful relationship. And I nurture those relationships. I try to be helpful to the attorneys that refer them, and I'll do a lot of work for clients on spec for them. And I always make sure that I tell the client, I'm doing this as a favor, not to you, but for the attorney. So it generates goodwill with them for that attorney who's using them for other matters. And I've always been a big believer, if you give, it comes back 10 times back. That's the way I've developed those relationships. I try to always focus on building relationships with attorneys who don't do what I do. I'm principally a commercial litigator, commercial real estate litigator, or a partnership, business ownership, dispute type of issues. There's very few people that have that expertise the way I do. So it's easy to find attorneys that do estate work or who do like real estate closings that don't get involved in that. And they want to know that their client is going to be well taken care of, so that when the recommendation is made, it winds up looking good for them.
Perhaps there are folks who are listening who are younger in their careers and thinking about starting their own firms, or they're working at a larger firm and ready to build something themselves. Given your experience and your background, what words of advice would you have for folks who are thinking about building something themselves now, starting today?
So this is probably the most difficult question for me to answer, because I've had one job my entire career. I've been in this firm. I started my first year of law school, and I'm still here over 50 years later. But I do give advice. And the best advice that I could give is be prepared. It's not easy. You need to be prepared in a number of ways. Financially, you need to have the financial resources that will carry you for a period of time that you're not panicking. You need to be assured that you have enough in the bank to pay you or your staff or any party that you come with for 6-8 months, with the expectation you're not going to bring in a single case. I admire people that have the chutzpah to get up, leave, and start firms. It's not easy. But I would say you need to have all of your ducks in a row before you do so. You need to have your space. You need to have your website. You need to have your phones. You need to have an air of professionalism, so that if indeed that the phone starts ringing, that clients will understand that this is not haphazard, that you're in a professional environment that have the ability. I always say to those clients that are going out of solo, what if you get 2 cases in a row? What if you have 3 cases? How are you going to handle it? Let's say you're wildly successful. Are you going to be able to hire? Do you have the money to do so? You don't want to be a one-off. God forbid you get sick. What happens to the clients? You need to be thinking all of these issues through. You want to go on vacation. Who's going to watch your office? What if an order to show cause comes in and you're in Hawaii sunning on the beach? How are you going to deal with that? I mean, obviously, technology today makes it a lot easier, but sometimes these people haven't thought these things through. So I always say, have a checklist. Make sure everything on that checklist is covered, not only in terms of what you've written down, but your ability to deal with every issue, financially, emotionally. A lot of times, people that are by themselves, it's hard. You want to knock ideas off. Am I doing the right thing? Is this the right case? That's the advantage of having a firm. So I would always say to people, leave with someone. Don't go by yourself. Try to find somebody who's similarly situated and get in bed with them and move forward together. It's not good to be by yourself, I don't think.
As I like to do for every guest, I'd love to give you the platform to share anything that you'd like to say, what's on your mind. Would love that before we wrap up.
It's May and we're in the midst of the Donald Trump trial downtown. As a litigator, lawyers are really under scrutiny. This guy that's doing the cross-examiner, Michael Cohen, is being dissected as if he were on Broadway in a big role. It's not easy being a lawyer. You're subject to witnesses going one way, judges ruling against you, documents appearing that you haven't seen. The legal profession is under incredible scrutiny, but yet we don't have a choice. We have to do everything right. And I find it a thrilling challenge. I find it, even at my advanced age, a pleasure and a thrill to come to the office every day, work with smart people, work with great clients, deal with issues that that are affecting their lives and coming up with solutions and resolving them to their satisfaction. It's still a great job, and I love doing it.
And how do people get in touch with you, Larry?
By email, by phone, it's easy. lkh@dhclegal.com.
Beautiful. And I'll make sure I put that in the show notes as well. Larry,
Great.
I can't believe it's been 4 years because it felt like yesterday.
Well, let's do it again sooner.
This. I would love that. And I'm rooting for your Knicks.
Yeah, let's go Knicks.
Thank you so much for the time. This has been Gregg Cohen and Larry Hutcher on Conversations with Cohen, and we'll see you next time.
Be well. Thanks, Gregg.